Hello, everyone. My name is Eric White, and I am the Assistant Director for Career Development in the College of Engineering at Oregon State University. And today I'm going to talk with you a little bit about salary negotiations. So, I know that negotiating things is not always the most comfortable activity for a lot of people, but it's an important thing to think about when you're considering job offers, and it can make a big difference both in your income, but also in your sort of quality of life and your approach to your job. So let's go ahead and start through. So the first question is, should I negotiate? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Negotiation is perfectly normal part of the job offer process. It's expected by most hiring managers. So it's not an unusual or rare kind of thing to do. It's an important thing to do. Uh, and thinking about it from the perspective of someone who's finishing up a university degree and going out there in the world, part of advancing your professional career is getting the salary and compensation package that you deserve. Um, Thinking about the impact of not negotiating, so we've run a little statistical analysis here. Journal Organizational Behavior has done this research. So you figure if life goes in such a way that you get a 5% annual increase, the difference in an initial $5,000 salary at a starting point of a career compounds into $600,000 total additional income over a 40-year career. So that's a huge difference. One other thing to think about is it's important to know what you want when you're negotiating. So today we're focusing mostly on salary, but remember that compensation packages include all sorts of other possibilities. So think through what you would like your working life to be in terms of income, but also think about working conditions and know what it is that you really want. Not just about salary, right? Think about what location you want to be in. Do you want to do some of your job via remote work? Do you need flex time? Do you like to be an independent worker? Do you like to be engaged in more team-centered stuff? Do you like to do a lot of travel? Do you want to avoid travel as much as possible? So think about all those things. In the bigger picture, it's really hard to negotiate effectively if you aren't quite certain what it is that you want to gain. So, and don't be afraid to ask. Rescinding a job offer is extremely uncommon. Now, Oregon is an at-will employment state, meaning that it is legally okay to rescind an offer once it's been offered, but it's very highly uncommon. So don't let that discourage you from negotiating. Okay, now there is one really important detail to note, and that is based on Glassdoor's research, women negotiated less than their male counterparts. 68% of women accepted the salary they were offered first offer, didn't negotiate. Only 52% of men do that. So there's a gender divide here, and it's sort of a legacy of some odd cultural differentiation between genders. The key takeaway here is that all people should negotiate of any gender for just about any position. And the best way to, over time, see the wage gap start to close is one step, is to say, look, everybody should negotiate. Everybody should be comfortable doing that and advocate for what they feel they deserve. So again, it's not always a comfortable thing to do, but it's definitely worth your time. And the benefits outweigh the discomfort. So, okay, thinking about government salaries. Sometimes there's this idea that, well, it's a public position, and so I don't really have an opportunity to negotiate. But that's not actually true. In terms of federal government jobs, most of the federal government jobs have a particular pay grade that's assigned to that kind of position and a range of steps within that pay grade. So whatever HR person you're working with will have a range in mind for a specific offer based on what the job is, based on experience, any unusual or specialized skills that you might bring to the table, and of course the budgeting situation for the particular hiring agency. So if the salary range that they've got is if there's a spread, you can negotiate within that range. Now, as a public institution, the federal government's general pay scale is online. You can find that. And there's a way to negotiate a higher step within that pay grade. Think about unique or special or unusual qualifications you bring. Think about what other costs might be involved, cost of living in one location versus a different location, that sort of thing. This is just a quick example of what the different pay grades and steps look like. So, for example, if you stepped in at a grade scale 9, if your first step is $50,000, step 10 is 65. So that's a huge range. I don't know that it's realistic to expect to negotiate between step 9 and step 10 as your first job out of college, but somewhere in there, you might be able to examine your qualifications, match those against the position description, and see if there's some reasons to go up from step 1 to step 3, maybe, something like that. So, right. So once we've decided to negotiate, how do we go about this process? So there are several steps you want to think about. The first one is, step number 1 is know your market value. So it's important to keep in mind that this is not comment on the value of your degree or the value of you as a person, right? Market value is just a way of assessing for a person with similar background and experience, applying or being hired to a similar position, what are the average salary ranges, right? So this is not a personal or moral or ethical value. This is just kind of what the job situation looks like at this time, right? So basically, market value is kind of the sum of your educational experience, typically your highest degree, but other things come into play depending on the specifics. Any specialized training that you've got, your working experience, and other experience, volunteer experiences, that kind of thing. You factor in the location and the size of the company and what industry you're in, right? So, and there are a lot of variables. So, for example, if you're putting in for, a sort of entry-level office management position, if you're working at that job in, a small town in mostly rural Kansas, the pay scale is going to be very different than if you're doing the exact same job in downtown San Francisco, right? The cost of living is night and day different, and so the salaries should be as well. Thinking about this, the type of company, are you applying to do this work for a nonprofit? Are you applying to do this for a Fortune 500 corporation? Thinking about the industry, is it an industry that typically has a lot of financial resources available? So in the bigger picture of agriculture, for example, if you're applying for a position in corporate agriculture, Syngenta is a big company. They develop new strains of seeds for industrial scale agriculture. If you're working on that kind of research project, you're going to be looking at much bigger salaries than being a seed research technician at a university or a conservation, technician at a nonprofit soil conservation organization, right? A lot more money in industrial scale agrochemicals, not so much in small sustainable organic farms. So all of those variables are things you need to think about in assessing your market value. Oregon in general is kind of middle of the road. We're not sort of at the low end of the bell curve in terms of socioeconomic standing, but we're also not a super high cost, high income location either. We're kind of somewhere in the middle of that bell curve. One thing to keep in mind, a bachelor degree is unlikely to sort of result in an immediate high-paying job right out the gate, first job after graduation. I know that's not fun to think about, especially if you've got student loan payments that are going to be a part of your life soon. But the reality is that people at the beginning of their professional career with a bachelor's degree, it's infinitely preferable in terms of income to not having a bachelor's degree, but it doesn't take you straight to the lifestyles of the rich and famous with your first job out in the workforce. So it's important to be realistic about that. Going on a little bit more about the market value, some tools you can use to assess that. Glassdoor has some interesting tools. Salary.com has some interesting tools. There's a payscale.com. There's some interesting data that you can find there. One of the nice things about looking at the public sector, state government or university jobs, salaries are generally pretty easy to find online. Other ways to sort of figure out what's a reasonable salary range, talk to somebody in the field. Do some networking via LinkedIn, for example, or talk to a professor in the field. Most of them are happy to help you learn more about the opportunities and what those look like in your field. Think about, for yourself as an applicant, what special skills, certificates, experience, volunteer work, classes, background, what do you offer above and beyond the minimum position description requirements that will make you an awesome candidate? And one last thing, I can't stress this enough, definitely practice your pitch before you actually have that conversation to negotiate your salary. It's definitely not a situation where most people will be the most effective in negotiating if the first time they've actually said out loud what they'd like is when they're actually face-to-face or on the phone with the person who's making their initial offer. So it's definitely, you want to practice that. Record yourself and watch it, see how well or not well you think you come across, and do some practice to adjust. Round up a friend or two to listen to, give you some feedback. That can make a big difference. Even if you still don't feel comfortable negotiating, if you practice it enough that you come across as not really stressed about the process, that can make a big difference. So thinking back to one of those tools, so this is a kind of one of those payscale.com data points. So you can kind of just get an idea over a certain period of time what the change looks like. So for example, from 2013 to 2018, not a huge amount of change for a forest conservation tech in Portland with 1 year of experience. So the Portland market tracks more or less identically with the national trend, right? So there's not a lot of variation. Other fields, there will be a big variation by region. I'm thinking there are some states in the Midwest who tend to pay K-12 public school teachers a lot less than some states in the coasts, right? That kind of thing. We'll see a bigger differentiation between local and national trends. And some fields, if there's been a huge explosion in demand, faster than academia can produce new graduates in that field, we'll see an increasing trend over time. So that's just an example of the kind of data you can get from payscale.com. Okay. So that's thinking about your market value. So step 2, don't say yes to an offer right away. Now this might be a little bit counterintuitive, especially if this is a job that's fantastic, you're really excited about it. It's a great organization, you can't wait to get started. Why would you not say yes right away? It's better to ask for a couple days to think about it. And one of the main reasons for that is, given a little time to study carefully exactly what's included in that offer, it may occur to you that there are some other things you should ask for as part of your salary or compensation package. Give yourself some time for your analytical skills and your creativity to come into play. You don't want to snap that up right the minute that it's offered to you, and then later think, oh man, I really should have asked for flex time instead of being locked into the 8 to 5, or whatever it is. Give yourself a couple days to mull things over. You might even want to run that by a trusted advisor or faculty member and say, does this seem like a standard, realistic thing? Am I missing something here? So give yourself some time to do some analysis. Ask for a couple days to think about it. Now, if you're looking at hoping you're going to get a handful of competing offers. If you need more time, you get an offer today, you expect to get an offer from another company a week from today, and you want to be able to compare them. Ask specifically for the amount of time you think you'll need. So I need a little more time to think this over. Can I get back to you in 10 days? Right? So, and kind of negotiate that out. Yeah. So, but don't say yes right away, even if it's the dream job. Right? Step number 3, be aware of what is your number, right? And keep in mind that negotiation isn't really, in this context, something that should have a winner and a loser. It's not really a zero-sum game that you should be playing, right? The goal of negotiation is to come to an offer that's beneficial for both parties and that both parties feel like is reasonable and honest, and everybody can live with this, right? So we want to find that middle ground where everybody is content, more or less, right? Having said that, there are some tactics to think about. One of the bigger ones is don't be the first person to give the salary number, right? If the hiring manager is asking you what is your specific number, you can kind of reflect back to them, well, what do you typically pay for a position like this? What's your typical range in this particular location or with this particular skill set, right? So kind of reflect that back to them. They'll know what their usual range is for this kind of position. And so see if you can extract some parameters out of them. Hopefully you've already done your homework, so you have a general idea what the ballpark figure would be anyway. If you're kind of arm twisted to actually give a specific number, go high. Go higher than you think is realistic. Usually that will lead to some back and forth. So they might come in with something that's low. So, okay, well, all right, you're not able to give me my first ask, but counter higher again than you think you're actually going to get. So you come down bit by bit from the high end, they'll come up bit by bit from the low end, and at some point you meet somewhere in the middle. Once you arrive at a figure that both people kind of agree on, in general, there's a second step. It's kind of like buying any car. They got to go check with their manager to make sure that this number is going to fit with the larger organizational goals and parameters. And so then they'll come back and there could be another cycle of negotiation, counter offer, this kind of thing. So it kind of depends on whether you're speaking and negotiating directly with a hiring manager or with someone who doesn't actually control the budget, and then they have to go run any outcome of negotiation by the person with budgetary control, and sometimes that leads to more back and forth. But just kind of take a deep breath and work through the process. One thing that it's important to think about, don't be drawn into negotiating salary and compensation packages before they actually make you an offer. Make sure that you have that offer before you start committing yourself to certain salary ranges, right? Because without that offer, you don't know what it is you're going to be paid to do in detail. So make sure there's an offer there before you talk money. So how do I phrase this kind of thing? One other tactic's useful, Columbia Business School. If you have a specific number rather than sort of like a rounded off figure, around 52,000, 51,750, the specificity has a psychological impact. People presume that you've done a ton of research and you have a very specific number for a very specific set of reasons, and okay, all right, fair enough. As you're having these conversations, remember, the organization is looking for someone who will help them accomplish their organizational goals, right? They're not hiring someone in order to give that new individual what they want. I mean, that would be great, but their overall purpose is improve something for the organization. So when you're negotiating, you want to focus on what you can do for the organization, not what your personal needs are, right? Now, you know your needs, you're negotiating to have those needs met, but the conversation needs to be what service you can provide to the organization, right? And always thank people for the offer, always express enthusiasm, right? And so there's kind of a little sample script here. The more specific reasons you can give for requesting a higher figure than the initial offer is, the more productive this negotiation is likely to be. So step 4, stay cool, stay flexible, even if this is not your happy place, right? Sometimes the reality is that salary is not flexible. Sometimes that is the case. But it's important, again, I think I mentioned earlier on, think of the big picture. You could be negotiating on sign-on bonuses or annual year-end bonuses. Depending on the company, a lot of startups or some other organizations, stock options is an issue. They don't usually vest right away, but depending on the circumstances, those could be quite a valuable element of compensation. If you're going to need to move from, especially from a lower cost location where you are now to a higher cost of living location, relocation package or assistance or some cost sharing with relocation is a reasonable thing to discuss. Think about how you want to live your work life. Do you need some flex time? Would you prefer to have a formalized agreement to do remote work sometimes? Maybe there's some other work-life balance arrangements, depending on if you're doing childcare or elder care or have other commitments. Some of these specific agreed upon working conditions could have a value that actually is a lot more important in the big picture than an extra $1,200 a year salary, right? So again, know what it is that you want and work towards that. Professional development is often an area where an organization can commit to being supportive. Maybe it's just a question of, I don't need a higher salary, but I would like to have a larger number of paid vacation days, right? So there's all different kinds of things you can work on to negotiate. The key is stay cool, stay flexible, stay calm. Understand that you're not going to be able to give somebody a list of your dream requirements and have them say yes to everything. That's really unlikely. So be prepared to give some ground, be prepared to compromise. Another thing to think about is know what your minimum is. What is the absolute minimum compensation that you can accept for this position and still feel that you're being treated fairly? And if negotiations can't get you to that absolute minimum that you feel is acceptably fair, be prepared to politely and respectfully decline. I mean, not all offers are a good fit for every single person, right? Now, depending on your circumstances, if you're in a position where you need to provide for your family and you need a job and the details are less important than some kind of income, sometimes you take what you can get, right? But in general, as a person leaving the university and kind of stepping out in your first professional career, every offer isn't a great offer. So think that through. And again, know what you want, know yourself, know what your minimum is. If they can't give you the minimum, maybe that's not the right place for you. Having said that, no matter the outcome, always be understanding, be thankful, be courteous, don't get pushy, don't get demanding. You know, it's a small world, and it could be that, you know, a few years down the road, you're going to cross paths again with the same organization or the same person that you're negotiating with now. And if paths cross again, it's important that you left people feeling positive about you, even if you didn't end up taking that job. So they think back and say, oh, I remember I negotiated with this person a few years back. It didn't work out, but they seemed like a really qualified candidate. They seemed really like a good person to work with. So try and leave that communication in a positive place, regardless of what the outcome needs to be. Right? Step 5, huge thing. Once you've agreed to specific details and specific compensation numbers, make sure to get it in writing and review it really carefully. Make sure everything's fair and is exactly what you remember discussing. If something's there that doesn't seem to quite match what you recall, reach out and touch base with the person you negotiated with and say, hey, this seems a little bit different than I recall. Hammer it out. If something needs to be revised, get that revision in writing before you make any big decisions. You know, don't give notice on your lease and lease a new apartment and put down a deposit on it, and give your 2 weeks notice at your current job before you have your next job offer in writing. That's really important. So yeah, one of those trust but verify kinds of deals, right? So those are the 5 steps when you think about salary negotiation. So for additional help with salary negotiation or any other part of your career hunt and career development, you can get help from the Career Development Center. For spring 2020, the best way to get help from us is online, right? career.oregonstate.edu. All kinds of different tools to work with there, resume samples to take a look at for your particular field. There's a comprehensive career guide that has a tremendous amount of resources and information in it. You just download that PDF. If you'd like to talk with a career assistant about your resume or your CV, most of the time we have physical drop-ins. For spring 2020, we have virtual drop-ins. And again, career.oregonstate.edu for the link to go ahead and drop in to one of those virtual drop-ins. Hours Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. is when those drop-in arrangements are set up. And then most of the colleges have a specific career advisor assigned to work with students in that college to make a virtual appointment with those folks. Spring 2020, virtual is the only way we're going to go. You can check in with Handshake, which you should be using for all sorts of purposes anyway. And then for a schedule for those college-specific advisor appointments, again, you can check on this website. So that's kind of a quick summary of where and how to get additional help. So hopefully this negotiation conversation has been helpful, and best of luck with your job hunt. And please don't hesitate to reach out online and work with us. We're happy to help you out with the specifics of your situation as much as we can. So, all right, have a good spring term and good luck. Stay safe out there.